Stella adjusted herself to help relieve a mildly stiff spot on her back, and then put up her feet. She was currently comfortably ensconced in Davy's couch, watching Fitz and Darrell attempt to outwit each other in a fairly unstrategic game of chess. She sipped her tea and honey and watched, amused, as her husband and the big round-faced, coppery-bearded human peered intently at the board, Darrell with his tongue stuck out, considering his next move. Stella was supposed to be assisting Millie, who was much further along in her pregnancy than Stella, but the fact was, Millie was doing just fine on her own. It could have to do with restlessness and enforced inactivity, or just the fact that, in prolonged close proximity, Davy was rubbing off on her, but either way, Millie's restless energy was increasing by the day, and she really didn't need anyone to do her running for her, at the moment, at least. So, Stella was, while appreciated and on hand in case anything was needed, largely unnecessary at the moment. A fact she was grateful for, as she was reaching the stage where getting up and walking around was becoming a little more like work and a little less like something you did without thinking. As for Millie and Davy, they were currently in the kitchen, preparing dinner. Stella craned her neck to peer momentarily through the half-open door behind her, wondering what they were up to at the moment. She was afforded a quick glance of twin flurries of activity as the two danced around each other, wielding knives, spatulas, pans, bowls, and random food and ingredients. Well, that seemed in order. She turned her attention back to the game in progress. Both Darrell and Fitz were looking smug. She glanced at the board. Neither of them had any reason to be. It was the most haphazard game she'd ever witnessed. She smiled to herself. But they were both having fun, and she was enjoying watching them. The game was highly entertaining by virtue that you literally could not predict who was going to win. Check. Oh, wait, that's your bishop. Stella giggled. Millie and Davy were having fun. Stella was a delight to have around, and made a lovely temporary addition to the people in and out of their home. Well, one of their homes. They were splitting time between here and Millie's Inn on the island, currently shuttered for the storm, though Lacey was busy serving up food to the few people who wanted to wander through. She'd probably ride out the storm in the restaurant. It was bigger and safer than her house. Millie skimmed by Davy, sliding the onions he'd just chopped into her sauté pan and skimming it lightly onto the stovetop, flicking the perfect amount of butter into the skillet without even having to think. They were chattering happily to one another while preparing dinner, as well as provisions for several more days. With Stella and Darrell here, and Rin coming in, there would be a lot of mouths to feed. They made sure to account for Sonia, too. She lived with her wife and kids, but since they both stayed busy all the time, Davy liked to lighten her load a bit, and since making dinner took time, he made sure to include them in the dinner planning when he made a large meal. Tipping the gorgeously golden onions onto a roast and throwing it into the oven, Millie dusted off her hands and turned her attention to Davy, who was mixing papaya and cream cheese to make a topping for some little pastries that they had just finished making. Those would not be around long. The papaya was an extravagance. Stella had brought a couple from the island. Davy's usual preference was for persimmon, that or apricot. Papaya was a welcome luxury. The whirlwind of activity was winding down, and they turned their attention to a more sedately paced cleanup, and the chatter continued. What time is it anyway? Rin should be here soon. Davy was looking forward to it. He hadn't seen his daughter in a few weeks, and was eagerly anticipating her arrival. 4:30, replied Millie, stuffing a spoon in her mouth. She ought to be walking in the door any minute. Davy walked over and tasted the sauce. Wow, nice job, Mill. You too, she said, around a mouthful of extra papaya topping. With nothing to occupy their hands, they'd started munching on the oddments left over from cooking, splitting a muffin that had made it out of the oven, but not in one piece. She said something about staying a couple of weeks, Millie informed him through a mouthful of the herbed mushroom, parmesan, and leek filling they'd made for the croissants. That's fantastic, Davy exclaimed. She was hoping you'd put her to work, Millie told him, if you can find something for her to do. Can I ever? He piped. I'm already behind from that trip out to the preserve with Alex. Rin's just what I need to help play catch-up. Oh, good, Millie said happily, planting a kiss on top of his head, as well as a blob of tomato sauce that had previously been on the corner of her beak. She proceeded to tip the skillet that had contained the pasta sauce up, funneling the last bit of it into her mouth, Well, Davy shrugged. Millie was 8 months pregnant, and she had both some odd tastes in food lately, as well as a voracious appetite. A little extra sauce wasn't going to hurt anything. He turned his attention to cleaning up. Rin was sitting at the small cafe, sipping a mocha, one with enough cream to choke a calf. Davy had gotten her hooked on them last time she was in the city, and after the long trip, she wanted a short breather before heading into the delightfully controlled chaos of her family. Her mother, in particular, had been slightly manic and moody lately. Completely understandable, but still. Sipping the last bit of the drink, she stood, placed the empty cup on the counter, and made her way to Davy's place. She knew the way by now. Tapping on the front door, she cracked it open and called inside. "Hello, anybody home?" "Rin!" Her Uncle Darrell and Fitz greeted her warmly as she made her way inside. Stella waved at her happily from the couch. "Good trip?" asked the good-natured Fitz, delighted to see Rin again. He rather fancied her, though at 28 and her just barely 21, he worriedly admitted he was probably a bit too old for her. His sister Fran, who was closer to Rin's age, had informed him he was being stupid. "Smooth sailing. How's Mom doing? And Davy?" Rin asked. Mostly fine." Fitz glanced over his shoulder, "barring a few small incidents involving food." "Food?" "Well, ingredients." They heard Davy's voice from the kitchen. "Come on, Mill, that's not healthy. Put it down and give me a hand." "Mill, honey? Mill, give me the spoon." Fitz and Rin looked at each other and made their way over to the kitchen door. Davy was on tiptoe, reaching for whatever it was Millie had. Millie, for her part, was holding it away from him, aloft and glaring. "Mill, you don't need to eat an entire brick of cream cheese. Put it down." Millie opened up her mouth and hissed at him, ropes of saliva and cream cheese strung between her tongue and palate, hot breath washing over Davy, who gulped, wide-eyed, and had the impression he was staring straight into a dragon's maw. "Okay, I'm just gonna let you snack. You enjoy," he said placatingly. "Mom, what the hell?" Rin bustled into the room. "Rin!" Davy cried, delighted. "You're here! It's so good to see you!" Hugs all around, and Millie looked sheepish. "I'm sorry, Davy. I didn't mean to do that." She was red-faced. "Don't be," Davy laughed. "That was hilarious." He pulled a face like he was hissing and extended his fingers like claws before throwing an arm around Millie and ruffling her hair affectionately. She continued to look abashed. "No, I shouldn't have done it." "It's fine. Here, have a pastry instead. You too, Rin." Davy busily distributed a couple of the papaya tarts to Fitz, Rin, and Millie, and scuttled out to deliver a few to the others. It was going to be a fun couple of weeks. Davy was delighted. "What do you think you're up to, Kincaid?" Vivica stormed into the office, slamming a small sheaf of papers down on the desk he was currently occupying. Alex grinned up at her. "Surprised? You can thank me any time. I'm happy to be of service." "Thank you? You're lucky I don't kill you. How on earth did you pull this one off anyhow?" She eyeballed him, waving the papers in front of his nose. The ferry ticket was poking out of the top. "Fair trade, mostly. And now you and I both get a well-deserved vacation." He beamed. "There's a hurricane going on, Alex. I'm not going out to that island now." "Relax," he cut in. "In a few days it'll all be over, and there won't be anything out there other than sunshine and people in swimsuits." Alex tried to placate her. "Seriously, Alex, what's the deal? Why are we tripping out to this island instead of Davy? He lives there. Well, Millie does anyway. Why not let him handle it?" Alex turned and gave her a direct look. "I swapped with him," he said. "And if you want an honest answer, it's because I don't want to go back to the preserve. I want to go out to a tropical island, have some drinks, fool around a bit, and maybe have some fun. If I can figure out what that is. I think it involves swimming. I wouldn't know anymore, Viv." "Don't they have a lake at the preserve?" she asked sarcastically. "They don't wear bikinis at the lake," he teased, shrugging. "You are unbelievable! And you're dragging me along on this pleasure cruise? Why?" "You had to come with me either way. I go, you go. But you know, I really did you a big favor." He raised his eyebrows at her.
Favor? She flapped her arms at him. How do you figure that?
Vivi, he leaned in and looked at her directly. Walk down to Wally's office and ask him to show you a photograph of the new construction site at the preserve. Davy and I were all the way at the top. Both of us. Go look at that, and then think about it a moment. Come back, and if you still want to go to the preserve, I'll call up Davy and tell him the whole thing's off. She could tell he was bluffing, but curiosity got the better of her. She flounced down the hall to Wally's office. She returned minutes later.
I am really looking forward to that beach.
That's the spirit. The trade had come about a couple of days earlier. Alex had been sulking. He was to go back out to the preserve once the construction had finished and move the control equipment from the old tower to the new one. He felt that if there was a way to articulate how much he really did not want to do that, it would involve more than words. He'd been planning on going over it with Davy anyway, so the two were having lunch at his place when the call came in that the storm buffeting the island had caused a partial outage there. Great, Davy sighed. I really don't feel like making that trip just yet. I've been on that ferry 100 times in the last few months. Not that it hasn't been worth it. He beamed over his shoulder in the direction of the front room where Millie, Stella, and Daryl were currently lounging, to give the two of them privacy. Millie had been through twice already, though, making inroads on the muffins. Davy hadn't been paying too much attention, having turned a blind eye to her recently non-standard eating habits. But the conversation momentarily came to a halt when Davy and Alex heard Rin admonishing her mother.
Mom, you can't eat ketchup by itself. Mom, hand it over. Put it down. Don't hiss at me. That is uncalled for, Mom. Go get a muffin.
Davy grinned at Alex. I love that woman, he said with a dreamy look on his face. Alex opened his mouth and closed it again. He'd been going to make a comment, but decided not to before realizing again that he was envious of Davy. Only slightly. He did not begrudge him his happiness, and he was pleased for his friend's good fortune.
Mom, I swear!
Davy looked at Alex. Maybe we should take them some muffins. Alex chuckled, rising from his chair. They carried the trays around the room. Millie daintily plucked one of the muffins Alex offered off of the plate, popping it into her mouth and chewing happily. Well, guys, said Davy ruefully, looks like I'm going to have to take a little trip. Wind's knocked something on the tower loose.
Aww.
General dismay. Suddenly, Alex had a thought. This was an opportunity. Davy didn't want to go out to the island, and Alex didn't want to go to the preserve. To top it off, the preserve was closer. A mere 5 hours either way by train. The island was a 7-hour ferry ride, in addition to the train he'd have to take to get to the port. Alex, at the moment, wanted nothing more than to be out on his way to an adventure in the tropics, meeting interesting people, ingesting interesting food and drinks, and doing interesting things. He had an image in his head of chatting with friendly, attentive people about something besides wires and sales figures, while watching the sun go down over the horizon. After all, Davy rattled on incessantly about the never-ending slew of strange and entertaining characters who seemed to come out of the woodwork every time he set foot on the isle. Alex was bored, lonely, and burned out. He felt he deserved a change of pace. This was it. He needed this. Hey, he said aloud, I've got an idea, champ. Why don't I go handle the tower on the island, and you run out and do the move for the preserve? You'll only be gone a couple days, and it's a lot closer. Then another thought struck Alex, an image more clear and real than his imagined island paradise. He remembered the early morning and what Davy had said. He suddenly felt guilty. Wait, never mind. I wouldn't want to send you out there alone. I'll have Vivi with me. Alex gave up on the idea, sighing internally. He'd have to find some other way to hoist himself out of his rut. I'll go with him. Alex turned his head. Millie had said it so matter-of-factly that Alex almost thought he'd imagined it. Davy's identical expression was the only indication that Alex hadn't been hallucinating. Mill? You sure about that? Davy seemed concerned.
Davy, my love, I've got almost another month to go, And if you don't want me eating your countertops, you'll get me out of here and find a way to entertain me. I'm about to go out of my skull.
Stella piped up.
That goes double for me. I don't feel the need to eat everything in sight, but Millie hasn't really needed my help, and I'm tired of sitting around. Daryl, you up for a trip?
Daryl looked hesitant.
If I go anywhere, it should be back to the island. There's work to do.
You're on family leave, and Davy can connect you back to Raoul's office from anywhere. I've got Tully's appointments handled up to next month, and I've already got the requisitions in for supplies to repair that runoff sluice down the western slope. If I can work remotely, so can you. Or did you forget we both have the exact same job?
Stella had the final word.
I'm looking forward to this,
Squeaked Millie.
Thanks, Alex.
She warmly pinched his cheek on the way through, stating,
I'm going to go pack.
Alex was so happy he could have kissed her. Well, no, he laughed to himself. Davy probably wouldn't appreciate that, he joked privately. And besides, her beak was still smeared with ketchup. Davy was staring after her, enchanted. Alex shook his head, grinning. Thanks, Alex, Davy said sincerely. Alex suddenly had misgivings again. Davy, I'm sorry. I wasn't thinking. I know you don't really like staying out there. No, cut in Davy. It's fine. I was out of sorts because Mill was out of reach. She'll be with me this time, so it'll be an entirely different story. Not that I didn't enjoy your company, man. He lowered his voice and spoke sincerely. I really appreciated that. You didn't have to hair off with me in the middle of the night, but you did. That was really decent of you. Alex demurred. I just felt like it. You're sure about all this? Yep, Davy said cheerfully, raising his voice again. It'll give us something to do. Millie's stuck in the house, and she's been feeling a little boisterous.
Boisterous?
Rin repeated incredulously. She and Daryl had wandered up.
She's gone feral.
Oh, she's not that bad, defended Davy. Right, Daryl?
No comment. Funny, she wasn't like this when she was pregnant with Rin. Maybe it's got something to do with her age, Daryl mused.
Davy's eyes went wide for a moment. You're just picking on her because she's your sister, he said loudly and dismissively, before fixing his lifelong friend with a manic look, leaning in and adding, Are you trying to get us all killed? Shh! Rin and Alex burst out laughing. Daryl motioned them down.
Davy might be right. Neither of you were there when she caught her sneaking food from the restaurant. Mind you, we helped make it.
I've heard this story before, Rin said. If I remember right, the ending of it is why I'm here in the first place.
More laughter. Davy called them all down, adding, Look, I'm not going to pick on Mill just because she's out of sorts and has a few odd cravings right now. She's the best thing that's ever happened to me and probably to any of us. If you think Millie's bad while 8 months pregnant, you should see me after 6 energy gels.
6?
Alex was aghast.
I'd be terrified to see you after 2. I know what you're like after 1. When did you ever have 6?
Long story. Remind me to tell you next time we have coffee. A thought suddenly struck Rin.
What about your Uncle Dal? I know Stella is staying here, but won't you have to go back for Fran's new accounting thingy?
Daryl looked hesitant.
Yeah, I guess I will. Sorry, Stell.
Have Fran do it, suggested Davy. It's her baby. Let her deliver it. Besides, I seem to recall her telling me I need to get out more. She's been tinkering with that thing for weeks. The sunshine will do her good. With the advent of the little phones Davy and his crew were helping install towers for, Davy and Fitz had been experimenting with what they could be used for, testing the full extent of their capabilities. Surprisingly, Fran, clerically minded as usual, had done a quick sketch-up of an accounting and requisitioning system that would use the little gizmos to keep the local shops and government agencies on the island from having to send paper forms and waiting for weeks to get them back. Nor would they have to spend an hour every week rattling off figures to someone on the far end, hoping they were writing everything down correctly. It was simple, brilliant, and efficient. Davy had coached Fran on the finer points of the technology, but she was the one who designed the whole thing. Fitz offered a few helpful suggestions, and the result was that Fran had been buried in the same technical morass that Davy, an incurable workaholic, usually occupied. She's been good about nudging me out the door to get the stale air blown off me, he grinned mischievously. It's time to return the favor. Daryl's coming with us, Stell. He winked at them. Minutes later, Millie and Davy had descended upon Fran in her semi-neat little workspace.
Hey, Fran, what's up?
Davy beamed at her. A glance told her something was up. Her first thought was Millie.
It's not time, is it?
She asked, mildly alarmed, though Davy was grinning.
Oh, no, Millie assured her. We just had a little favor to ask you, on our behalf. Well, and Daryl's. Daryl's?
Fran was now confused. Davy quickly hopped in. Fran, you've been incredible the last few months, with me being in and out, and I think it's time I rewarded you for all your hard work and responsibility.
You're not firing me, are you?
She deadpanned. Promoting you. He could barely contain the grin on his face. Fran was still suspicious.
From the looks on your faces, I'm going to go ahead and insist that it comes with a raise.
She gave them an insouciant smile that reminded them both of Fitz. Done. Well, a stipend. Davy agreed evenly. That caught Fran by surprise.
What? I was teasing. Stipend. What are you? Oh, no. No. A favor for Daryl. You're trying to ship me off to that island.
Her eyes went wide and she set her jaw. Only for a few days, Davy assured her. I've got to go out to the preserve and Stella's coming with us. We'd all like Daryl to come with her, and with me and him gone, it leaves nobody on the island with any technical or administrative experience. You've got both. Fran sighed.
And we can't wait a week or two?
Davy gave her a regretful smile. You know we can't. Contracts with Verity and the island government. If the tower hadn't gone out, you and Daryl could have just worked with Alderman Fowles from here. But if Alex doesn't manage to get it up in time, we'll be behind schedule.
That's an unavoidable circumstance. Surely the contract accounts for that.
Fran tried one last-ditch effort. It does, Davy admitted. But arguing that with our biggest client sounds like a headache. And a bad idea.
I'm sorry, Fran,
Millie interjected.
I know it's a lot to ask.